private in the U.S. Marine Corps, World War II, December 31st, 1925, February 5th, 2011. Annville Miller, she was a private in the U.S. Army, May 22nd, 1940, April 25th, 2024. This video is in their honor. Love you, Mom and Dad. Hey everybody, so as you saw earlier in the video, we are here at Indiantown Gap National Cemetery. I just visited Mom and Dad's grave. Normally I do a video on Veterans Day. Yesterday I was out with Crazy Ralph. We went out to Lidditz to do a walking to Maine. And I'll have to admit, going out with Missy and Ralph have been having a lot of fun. And it's been good for my spirits to get out again. Going out with Josh and Sharon as well. These guys have been all taking me out to different places to do different things. My health is still a little funky. It's up and down, but it also takes a little bit of toll on me walking. But I did want to come out here today on the 12th to tell you guys a story, do something a little different than we normally do. So today's video, I'm going to tell you a story, which I've told it before, of my dad and his service to the country. When he coming up to World War II, he was still 17 or 16 when it would have started. 17 when he could have actually enlisted and all that. But so he had to wait a couple years. I think it was 1943. He tried for the first time. His best friend Arthur Lengel had joined the army, would ultimately die on the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. His other really good friend Paul Lehman, he would wind out serving in the army as well, but he served as a tank commander in Africa. He had the really unique story where they did this on PBS, where they were facing off against a bunch of tigers, and really the Shermans, they could take them down, but it was very, very hard. And a lot of times with the numbers they had, it was a death sentence. And somehow they fired and it blew up right around, where the muzzle comes out, where it fires out of. And the only thing they could think of that happened is the shot actually went right down the barrel of the tank, and it's 1 in a billion chance, basically, that something of that nature would happen. And they survived. And he had another other friends like Frankie Muchler. We visited the Ravine Memorial, the honor roll, on a short, and talked about a bunch of the guys. But they had, just in that really small town, 6 or 7 guys died, and paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. And that's part of what Memorial Day is for, the guys that actually have died for our country. Veterans Day is for our members of the armed forces that had served and are no longer serving, and Armed Forces Day is for our current soldiers. And so here on Veterans Day, we want to talk about our veterans, and these guys were all our veterans. And my dad, he went when he finally was of age, and he had a hernia, and the Marine Corps said, "Sorry, son, you're 4F. We can't have you in the Marine Corps. Now, if you get a surgery, maybe there'll be a chance." So he went and got the surgery because he cared that much about serving his country, and it showed his courage and his honor. Got the surgery, went back, and even then they were like, under normal circumstances, we probably still couldn't accept you. But because we're so desperate for men, if you make it through boot camp on Parris Island, we will, you'll be a Marine, and you'll be able to serve your country in that way. So they took him in, he went through boot camp, and he passed. The cool story, which is sad as well, they had a drill instructor who was particularly pretty intimidating and scary guy. I'm gonna wait a little bit for the breeze here to end because it's pretty windy here today. It's typical November. We're definitely in fall. But this drill instructor had served in World War I and some in World War II. And he broke down and started weeping. worried about the wind. But you may ask, well, why was he weeping? Well, it's because he had experienced war and he had the empathy and compassion of somebody that had served. And he knew what was going to happen to these young men. And he knew many of them weren't going to come home, and many of them didn't. My dad had developed a strong friendship with 4 guys in boot camp. 3 of those 4 guys didn't come home. They died on the different islands. You know, most of them would be in the 5th Division of the Marine Corps. Some went to the 3rd, and so on. But someone went to like Iwo Jima, Okinawa, places like that, I guess. Saipan died, killed in combat. My dad joined the mortar crew, and he became part of the group of Marines, part of the 5th Division that was cleanup crews. So when the major battles were over on some of these islands, he would be part of the groups that would sort of gather up the final Japanese troops that had refused to surrender and get the islands to the point where they were truly conquered and everybody was cleaned out of there, so there shouldn't have been any danger. I mean, you still would have had your landmines and other things that were there, but in general, you know. So Dad served Guam, I think Saipan. I'm not sure what some of the other islands were, but he was 3 or 4 islands that he went in and cleanup crews. And one of the unique stories from that is to get some of these Japanese soldiers to surrender, because they wouldn't naturally surrender, because Japanese government had told them if they capture you, they'll do horrible things to you, they'll eat you, they'll torture you, so on and so forth. So they would put out in their dinner, they would be sitting there beside the jungle, or whatever, the woods or forests that were there, and they would put plates of food out next to the edge of the jungle, and they'd be playing a movie for the troops. Well, these Japanese soldiers would come out, grab a plate of food, and sit in amongst the American troops or British troops, and they would eat their dinner, watch the movie, go back out to the jungle, put their plate down, grab their rifle, and eventually do this 3 or 4 times, and then see, okay, they're not going to hurt me, and they'd surrender. And that's how they got a great deal of them to actually surrender, doing things like that. It's a unique story that a lot of people don't know about. He eventually wound out working his way through to China at the end of the war after Japan had surrendered, and he would be on one of the ports where they would guard Japanese ships that had surrendered. Well, the whole surrender of Japanese Navy and Army. So the only time he ever had to fire his gun was the Chinese had been treated brutally by the Japanese, and Japanese like to do a lot of things like beheadings and things like that. So the idea is the Chinese, because they had lost everything, they would go and they'd rob these ships. Well, my dad was guarding one of these ships, and he had to shoot at one of these little, I guess, dinghies or something like that, and thankfully the guys turned around and left. But he said it was some tense moments there for him, because he said he didn't want to kill somebody. He had actually, when he was over in China, had befriended a Chinese man, taught him English, and they wrote for 5 or 6 years, letters back and forth. I have a picture of the man, I have the letters. It's a really cool thing. I actually have some different things that Dad had from there, Chinese money and things of that nature. But he also met an English gentleman. I have that letter somewhere too. I'd like to find that again and read it to you guys, because they were both involved. My dad was big in hunting. This Englishman was, country gentleman, officer that they had connected in that regard, and they wrote for years as well. And I think they actually had written some kind of article together about what hunting and shooting was like on either side of the pond, England and America. But these are stories of every veteran, and these are individuals that we would not have the rights. We wouldn't be celebrating Veterans Day today without their sacrifice, just their willingness to write a blank check, because they didn't know whether they're coming home or not. A lot of them didn't. Here at Indiantown Gap National Cemetery, these are the guys that got to come home. Arlington is one of those cemeteries, the guys that didn't get to come home. And who paid the ultimate sacrifice. And that's something that we need to remember on these days. This channel, we try to do a lot of stuff in memories of hometown history, hometown heroes, tell those stories about those heroes and what they sacrificed, what they did. And all over here are individuals that gave so much, came back. Maybe the wounds weren't evident on the outside, but they were on the inside, and it's something they always struggled with for their whole lives. And that's something to be thankful for, that they were willing to do that. And to say thank you to all my friends that are veterans, also to all veterans out there, I say thank you for all you've done. And thank you to Mom and Dad. Thank you to Dad for your service for our country. I will always appreciate and honor you for that. So as always, I want to say thank you everybody for coming along. We'll see you all about town. Happy Veterans Day.